Awesome. Well, like Sabrina said, my name's Kylie. I am one of the speech pathologists here. Hopefully you guys are able to see my slides. My goal today is definitely to give you some information, but I also hope that people participate. I do not have an hour's worth of information to give to you in these slides, so I hope that people have come to talk. So today I really want to focus on how we can get some practical strategies for everyday communication for you and the person that you're caring for. I know that for a lot of people, one of the biggest things that we talk about is how frustrating communication can be, both for the individual and for the caregivers. So I hope you leave today with a couple wonderful strategies. So my goal today is to talk a little bit about how dementia affects communication, strategies that tend to work well, how to respond to repetitive questions, memory supports to use at home, and finally a little bit about caregiver well-being. So dementia in general, when people think about it, often just think about memory loss, but it actually affects many cognitive skills that support communication. So a person may have difficulty with finding words, following conversations, paying attention, organizing their thoughts, or processing information quickly. This often looks like someone may not be listening, that they don't care, or even sometimes that they're being stubborn. But in actuality, it's really that their brain may be having more difficulty processing information as quickly and efficiently as it used to. This is probably the most important slide of my presentation. One thing that I really like to ingrain in people is that the goal is not to have perfect memory. The goal is not to correct every mistake, but instead we want to focus on connection, participation, reducing frustration, and preserving dignity. When we can really kind of shift that goal from getting the right answer to how can I have a positive interaction, conversations are much more successful. So some of the most effective strategies that we know are getting the person's information or attention first before you start to speak, saying their name, making sure that they're looking at you, getting into the same room if at all possible, trying to reduce those distractions. So turning off the TV. If you're in a more of a group setting, can you move to a quieter room to be able to have a conversation? Short, simple sentences. It doesn't mean talking to them like they're a child, but using kind of easier language, simplified grammar, and then making sure that we really only kind of give one question or one statement at a time, and then really allowing them the extra time that they may need to respond. And finally, using visual supports or gestures whenever possible. Sometimes it's easier to show something than to explain it. So, ways that we can ask better questions. This will make a huge difference. Open-ended questions require a lot of thinking, memory, and decision making. So instead of asking, what would you like for lunch? Offering two choices that you know either you have or that they may be interested in. It reduces that cognitive load and it does make it easier for them to still participate. Instead of you just saying, this is what we're going to have, they still get a choice. But it's not this big open-ended question of what do I want for lunch? Now I have to think of what would I want? What's the name of that food? If I can't think of the name of that food, what else can I say to get my point across? Additionally, like I said in the other slide, trying to use visual aids to support that when you need it. So, actually showing them, instead of what do you want to wear, showing them the blue shirt or the green shirt so they can see it. And then even without having to verbalize anything, could they make a choice and select one of those items? Similarly, if you can't have the exact item in front of them, along the lines of lunch, right? You could take all the things out, but even that can get a little confusing. But could you show them a picture of the sandwich that's already prepared for them to be able to make that choice? The goal is really that we want to keep them as independent as they can. And so how can we make that more successful and more achievable by having these extra supports and reframing our questions. Like I said before, one of the hardest things to do is to wait. For most people, they need that additional time to understand the question, think about it, and be able to formulate their response back. One thing that I often recommend is trying to ask the question and then silently counting to yourself to 5 or even 10 before you repeat the question or before you try to give additional information or rephrase the question. Sometimes they just need that extra time. Even though it might feel like a long pause to you, it might be really what they need to be able to give you an answer and a response back. As caregivers, we often really want to jump in and be helpful, right? That is our goal. But when we immediately provide an answer or do a task for our loved one, we may accidentally be taking away some opportunities for them to still be independent. Instead, you can try offering a hint, providing those choices again, or even just in general, providing enough support to allow them to be successful. You want to think about yourself as a coach rather than a rescuer. So this could be, trying, like we talked about earlier, having those pictures, even if it's something that maybe was a task they were able to do independently before, like make a pot of coffee. How could you have written instructions if reading is something that they're still able to do? How could you have picture instructions so they could follow along, find the items that they need to start the task, know what steps go in what order, so that they'd still be able to do that for themselves? Obviously more supported than before, but they can still feel accomplished with, I was able to make that pot of coffee for myself. There are, of course, limitations to this. Another time that I really like people to have those conversations with their loved ones is more in earlier stages when maybe people are not as privy to the changes that are happening, and especially when it comes to social situations. So one thing that you never really want to do and is often very hard to do as a caregiver is to watch your loved ones struggle through a conversation. They can't find the word. They kind of lost their thought in the story. One thing that is natural for all of us to do with our friends and our family is to be like, oh yeah, the name of this person, and fill it in for them. Or, you're talking about Bob. And there's nothing abnormal about that, kind of jumping in to provide when you can see, oh, they're really not going to find this person's name. Or being able to kind of trigger and be like, oh, yeah, you were telling us about XYZ, and see if that helps to kind of bring back the thought that they were having. And again, thinking in social situations to allow them to keep going. It still seems natural because you're their loved one. And so you would be there to be like, oh yeah, keep going with this story, without it becoming clear and obvious that they're stuck or them having to say like, I don't know what's next. I don't remember what I was saying. Being able to kind of jump in and help in those, you're a support, even if it is a little bit more of kind of giving the answer they were looking for. Repetitive questions. I feel like this is one thing that comes up often and is very frustrating as a caregiver. Usually repetition happens because they truly and genuinely do not remember that they've asked you that question. Other times it can be that they're maybe anxious or uncertain and are kind of seeking your reassurance that they think something was happening and they think that you told them about it, but now they're not confident in themselves of what was the information that was given to me before. It's really important to remember that the repetition's not intentional and that they are not trying to annoy you, even though when it's 4 p.m. and it's the 100th time you've answered this question, it can start to feel that way. So responding to those repetitive questions, our natural reaction is often to be a little frustrated. And so we make statements like, I already told you that, you already asked me that. They usually don't help them remember, and it usually is only going to create frustration for both parties. Instead, trying to provide some calm repetition of the information, validate, yes, we do have an appointment later today, it's this time, And I think another opportunity that this brings is finding ways to use some type of written reminder, whether it's a note or a calendar, a whiteboard. Can you bring the person back to that place where that information is located and really start to reinforce that when you have questions about what's happening for the day, this is a place that you can go look. Certainly, you can always ask me, but continuing to bring them back to every time we talk about our schedule, this is the thing we go and look at. So, kind of to jump to that, memory supports. We should probably never really be relying solely on our memory, and certainly not as there are changes to it. So, creating these external supports, calendars, whiteboards, having a daily schedule, labels on items around the house, any kind of notebook. There's lots of options kind of for different points of disease progression. But I often kind of reinforce that the environment can become the memory system. How can we set up the house and the places that they are the most often to best support their memory? I also like to remind people that it would be pretty far-fetched of us to think that any of us would have all showed up here at the right time on the right day without some type of memory support for ourselves. And so if we're using calendars and we're using alerts and reminders and things like that, how can we modify those from maybe what the individual was using before to continue to work for them, or to find new ways that are similar to what they were used to prior to continue to support their memory as there are changes throughout the disease. Behavior. So I think another thing along the same lines as those repetitive questions is behaviors can really become challenging. So instead of, thinking to ourselves, how do I stop this behavior? Can we reframe it and say, what is this person trying to communicate to me? Behaviors typically reflect some type of unmet need, whether they are in pain, they're tired, they're frightened, they're overstimulated. There's usually something bigger that's happening that's leading to the behavior. And so trying to identify what they might be feeling, what's the situation around you that is leading to this, what might have been missed, and trying to understand what's the underlying cause of the behavior and not necessarily just why are they acting like this, or what, how can I stop them from acting like this? Conversations. I think a lot of times well-intentioned conversations end up being memory tests. Questions like, do you remember this? Can create some type of anxiety, even embarrassment, when they're not able to say that they, if they have any memory of it. But instead, kind of inviting some conversation and using supports to allow them to talk about anything, and reminding us again that accuracy is not the most important part, but rather that we would rather have this meaningful moment and, hear whatever part of the story or whatever thoughts come about when we're looking at photos, listening to a certain song, reading a certain, book, or talking about one of their favorite hobbies. The goal is really just for connection, not can they accurately tell me about a trip we went on 15 years ago. Kind of jumping back to independence, I think throughout the process, there's ways to maintain some amount of independence, whether it's making simple choices like, do you want to sit inside today, or do you want to go sit out on the porch and have breakfast? Do you want coffee or tea? Going back to making the choice of like, what shirt do you want to wear? I know a lot of times it can seem a little silly and they're quite simple, but having some type of control when there's a lot of things out of your control can make the person feel a lot more calm. It can keep their autonomy and really kind of preserve that dignity too of, every single day we get to pick what we want to wear, and what we want to eat and where we want to sit. And so how can we continue to make those choices throughout the day? Even if it's making the decision of, I want to go eat breakfast in my pajamas first, and then I'll come back and get dressed. Finding those ways to kind of have those different decisions and personal preferences be respected, even as communication and decision making is more challenging. Kind of a secondary discussion point, but I did want to put it in here as well, is that there can be changes to eating and swallowing. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it is certainly things that can occur. So being mindful when you are having meals with your loved one. Are they coughing? Is there any kind of throat clearing that's happening? Do you notice that later in the day when they're getting ready for bed and they're brushing their teeth or you're assisting with that, is there food still in their mouth? Or any kind of unintended weight loss as well. There are some simple strategies to make meal times and safe eating kind of continue. Being upright, not being reclined in your chair or laying down in bed and having snacks or drinks, reducing distractions. So maybe not having the TV on, or kind of saying for the first 10 or 15 minutes of the meal, we're just going to sit here and eat and then participate in socialization afterwards, and encourage slower paced eating. Sometimes people can be a little impulsive and take really large bites or large sips or put large quantities of food in their mouth before they're chewing and swallowing. Additionally, there could be changes to appetite, kind of in both directions. Sometimes it may seem like they're really hungry and they're asking for food a lot. Sometimes that may be true, but it could also be that they may not remember they've already had a meal. And so finding some calmer ways to explain or even kind of show them like, oh, we have all this stuff still out here in the kitchen. We got to clean up from breakfast. We've already had, eggs and toast this morning. Or the opposite, where they're not able to recognize that they're hungry. And so maybe without you prompting or encouraging meal times, they wouldn't be asking you for food in the same way that they did before. Kind of regardless of any of these things that you may see, it's definitely something to bring up to your medical team and then consider seeing a speech pathologist as well. Swallowing is another part that kind of falls into our broader scope. And then I always want to include a slide about well-being because caregiving is hard. It's stressful, there's frustration, there's sadness, there's guilt, and all of those things are normal, but really kind of reminding yourself that the goal is not to reason yourself out of the problem, but how can you find ways to modify what you do so that it's hopefully less stressful for you and also more successful for your loved one. How can we change our communication approach so that it can be more effective and less frustrating? So if you can only remember kind of a few things from today, I want you to remember that connection is more important than correction. Behaviors can serve as a form of communication. Our goal is to support independence any way that we can. There's memory strategies across the beginning of the disease all the way to the end, and then also finding ways to take care of yourself too. And, finding ways to reframe things to better understand why something's happening so that it doesn't feel as personal, or even so, like, how can you kind of set yourself up for as much success throughout the day? So I would really love to hear from anybody. What are some strategies that have maybe worked well for you and your family? And then even what are some challenges now that we could, problem solve, because you're probably not the only one experiencing that. But really here kind of for any questions or any other sharing that you guys would like to do today.
I have something, I don't think my situation is unique, but my mom is, I don't even know what the proper term is. She wears a hearing aid. She has zero hearing in her left ear and only partial hearing in her right ear, and she wears a hearing aid. So that in itself is frustrating her, and she's losing that partial hearing that she has. As well as she has macular degeneration, which is so advanced. I'm not even sure if she's seeing squiggly lines or just colors on TV. So that just adds to the frustration. And the only games or entertainment she really still wants to be involved with is dominoes, and that's become difficult for her. So I'm just wondering, are there some other things? I mean, I've resulted to buying domino wood bricks that are the size of my phone so that she can
Mhm.
see. So I guess I'm just kind of looking for something else to entertain her that might help her because she doesn't read Braille. Um, her lip reading is difficult because of her vision.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying to figure out some things to entertain her and ease her frustration.
Yeah, that is definitely challenging, because our first thought is always, can you read? Can you, have those visual supports? I like the idea of making things larger. The other thing would be to um, have different textures on them. Like, even if there were dominoes that were raised, could she feel like, okay, that this is a three and a one? Um, and then there are other games and things like that where you can kind of, depending on what her interests were before, or games that she already liked, are there ways to modify it so that she could feel the difference between cards, or things like that? And it wouldn't necessarily have to correspond with the number itself, but, you know, could there be this way of understanding, okay, this, if I feel that there's like a button glued onto this thing, then I know that that's this specific type of card.
I never
um
even got to look for textured dominoes. I'm gonna look into
yeah,
that because I bought
yeah,
the big giant playing cards where it doesn't show the whole like number and the excuse me, the face, the card category that it belongs to. I bought some of those where it just shows the I don't even know what to call it, what the number is or something, but she got
yeah,
bored.
like it's just a card that has the big number on it
Yeah,
instead of
instead
like
of
a
the
traditional card
yes,
with
and she got
numbers and
bored with
everything.
those. She didn't want to play those anymore, and I think it's because they became difficult for her to see.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'll look into that. I guess I just want something to entertain her, and because
Hmm.
I leave notes for her, and that's become difficult, and I have to write the letters really big. That's become
Hmm.
difficult for her to see, and I'm just trying to lessen her frustration.
Yeah.
I have to step away for 1 second, so maybe you could take somebody else's questions. Her physical therapist is at the door.
One
Okay.
idea too that comes to mind when it's hard to also just hear voices too is the idea of music and sound. So, for example, it might be hard to hear somebody say, to go to the bathroom or to have lunch, but using like the repetition of music as well too. So, using like an Alexa or Google, things like that too, where like when a specific sound plays, that's when you do an action as well too. So, a lot of times too, as hearing changes, you start to adapt to the rhythm of the music too, so you can kind of feel the beat of it or feel like the music as it's coming too. So just an idea for anyone else who's kind of trying to figure out a way to verbalize without verbalizing too, like using music cues to kind of help adapt like a change or transition as well.
Another thing too is that, like, a box of things. So instead of looking at pictures, are there meaningful objects to them that could still bring up a story? Because they'll be able to feel what it is, and still hopefully see some general shape of it. But being able to kind of have those conversations based on objects instead of, a picture of something. So if they really liked to garden, instead of having it be a picture of their garden, is there, one of the gardening tools or a packet of seeds or something that could still bring up those same conversations to have as well?
I also really liked, Kylie, your reminder as well of like using. So, like, I'm a mom of two boys that needs a lot of alarms to get moving in the morning. We have get ready, brush your teeth alarm. We have the bus stop alarm. I have the buses coming at the end of the day alarm. And so, even just that reminder too of that's like what I'm used to now. So, like, how can I potentially use that just as different tools? So I want to just thank you for that idea too, of like what and how we're kind of used to things, especially as technology has grown, what we've gotten used to when it comes to calendars or shared calendars and how to kind of adapt with that. Has anybody here, do you feel ever frustrated with, we can think of it in two ways. So like the first way being like frustrated in not knowing how to respond to them based on what they're communicating to you, or in the other aspect of like feeling frustrated in not knowing how to communicate with them based on a situation that might be happening or a change that's going on and trying to figure out the best way to communicate with them.
Yes, that's a definite problem. Kylie, if I could get you to go back when you first started, you had 6 bullet points. I think it was your first slide. And to me, that was great reminders and some help. If I could see that again.
Absolutely. Let me
And
pull
then I'll
that
have a comment
slide back
on
up.
another thing here in a minute. And I do all of that, and yet reminders, constant training and retraining on my part is good. Uh, the, the, the other question or comment that I had in communicating, my wife Jackie is changing, as you know, Kylie. And the thing where you said, well, do you want to walk or sit outside? I'm finding that is a good question in the past. But what I'm finding now is if I say, do you want to go for a walk? One item. It's kind of like asking just one question. To whereas if the answer to that is no, I would say, do you want to sit outside? So it's two separate things, and that seems to clarify for her at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes that binary choice becomes more challenging as well. Kind of secondarily to that, too, do they understand what you mean when you say, do you want to go for a walk? Right? Because
Yeah.
we all have this understanding, we know what that means, but sometimes the word walk doesn't connect to that activity. So acting it out, showing them a picture of it, um, even a picture of if you consistently walk to the same park, something that might help bring back this idea of what does the word walk mean.
Yeah, good. Yeah, the other thing I really liked is pause 5 or 10 seconds on a question. My patience is a challenge in that area, and I needed that reminder.
Exactly. It is really hard and it feels like a really long time for us to wait. But sometimes they really just need that extra time. And if they're still not getting it after that 10 seconds, then maybe it is the right, taking away the two choices and asking one at a time, or, modifying the question in some other way, getting visual aids, taking them to, see, like, do you want to go sit out here? Um, and being able to reference that place. But if we do those things right away, then it can become really overstimulating. Or if we ask the question, do you want this or this? And they don't give us an immediate answer. And so then we say, oh, do you want this? And wait for a yes or no. Oh, do you want this? And now they have 4 questions running through their mind and probably will have no answer for you.
Yeah, yeah. She becomes overwhelmed very easily. Uh, yeah, a lot of patience required. Your other slide where you mentioned the problems that caregivers go through? Oh yeah, I understand. That's why I do
Exactly.
a lot of training, on
Yes.
my own, and and Synapticure has helped so much.
Yeah. But it's frustrating because you're waiting for that answer and you're not getting that answer and you're trying to do 5 other things. And so waiting that 5 or 10 seconds does feel like a lifetime sometimes because you're just like, I just need to know what shirt you want because we've got to get going. We've got to get out of the house. We've got to pick a shirt today.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing, as far as what we go through as caregivers, I may have 10 things on my mind that I need to get done, but Jackie walks up with a question, and I have realized it doesn't matter how simple it is. I need to stop what I'm doing right then, because right then it's on her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't, it's lost, and then she can become frustrated. So, my day is interruptions, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
She is my priority.
Yeah, and finding ways to try to accept that and be aware, right? That before you probably could have said, "Oh, give me a minute and we can have that conversation." But now if you wait that minute, the thought's gone, and then exactly it's more frustrating for both of you because now it's, she knows she forgot the thought, and so she's trying to think of the thought again, and you're trying to help, but then it just becomes a much more long and drawn out thing than kind of stopping where you're at to see if she can get whatever it is out and then being able to go back to your other task.
Yeah, yeah, and I do many other things, and I don't think there's really an answer for this. Is for some of what we just described, I knew exactly what to do yesterday, but today's a new day,
Yep.
and I see other agreement on that one.
Yeah, even within the same day, you could ask a choice question in the morning and it might go great and they pick something immediately, and then come the afternoon, you've got to give one option at a time. Or, you have to make sure that they are in the same room facing you, no distractions, to be able to ask a simple question where maybe in the morning you were making breakfast and talking and they were able to participate. It can change day to day throughout the day.
Yes.
When you were talking about not correcting them, I'm some days I'm not sure if my mother's disease is progressing super fast or it's like start and pause, start and pause. I'm finding that when she has visits, like from my brother or my daughter, maybe an hour later after they've left, she's not sure if she had a dream or if it actually happened. Um, or she'll say things specifically with my brother because he's not as engaged or involved as he should be. And she'll say, "Hey, have you spoken to your brother today?" And I'll just pause because he left like an hour ago. And I'll just say, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, I did speak to him." But I
Mm-hmm.
feel so sad that she doesn't remember he was actually here. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't want to say, I'm not sure if I should remind her he was just here, for fear that it'll upset her that she doesn't remember he was just sitting next to her and spent 3 hours with her.
Mm-hmm. It's tough. It's one of those things where you could try it and kind of say, "Oh yeah, I talked to him earlier today. He came over," and just almost make it a little bit nonchalant and not draw to the attention like, "Yeah, he was here. He talked to you for 3 hours," but just kind of saying, "Yeah, we talked this morning. He came over." Um, and see how that goes. That can still be frustrating, but kind of the most casual, the most like, "Oh yeah, we already did it. He, talked to him today." That can be a little bit more helpful versus "He was here, he came at this time, this is what happened," like recounting all the details.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
always like to say too, those are perfect like talking points and conversation starters. So the more that their mouth is moving too, the more their mind is moving. So then saying something like, "Yes, we talked this morning. Can you tell me a story about when he was a child? Or tell me, didn't he hate when you made pork chops?" Or, you just kind of get them talking. And then their mind is moving more. You guys are conversing, they're speaking more. And a lot of times, too, by the end of it, she might be like, "Wait a second, was this here?" But it just allows them to use that like subject matter as a part of a conversation starter too, that's just going to get them talking more, and with that then their mind is moving more. And so sometimes when they're in this moment of just even confusion or forgetfulness, or just in a moment where like as a caregiver our hearts are hurting a little bit because we know that something might be a little bit askew, using that then as like a talking point just to get them to speak more. And the more that they're just moving their minds, the more that they're kind of just going throughout their day. But I always like to use those moments then as like a cue for a conversation for a little bit more. So, tell me more about when this time happened or about my childhood in this way. And sometimes too, it gets to the end of the conversation and different dots are connected. But worst comes to worst too, it's a fun time to just connect and hear stories as well.
Yesterday, like my mother is a huge Steve Harvey fan. She'll watch anything Steve Harvey, right? So the TV for the most part, 24 hours a day is on Steve Harvey, whatever. Yesterday we watched Animal Control for her the first time. And I have not heard my mother laugh so hard in so many years like she did yesterday. It was like the best night. For one, maybe 2 hours we watched. And I was like, oh, we have a new show we can watch. I can get off of Steve Harvey now. So that was a good day, good moment with her.
That's really great. I always like to say that moments become memories. And while we're going through a lot of really hard days, sometimes it's just fun to find those types of moments. And like when you're having the really hard days, reflecting back on like, man, I can't wait for this to be a memory that I can use on those really hard days to bring me back to like the okay moments of life. And even in the days where we all know there's like the ups and the downs and the ins and the outs and all of that, trying to even find that moment in that day that you want to have to be that memory to walk you through it, and just allowing yourself to kind of find like beauty in what you're going through, even if that beauty is just, wow, I get to sit here and enjoy this moment with my loved one, or we get to, yes, it might take us a little bit longer to have this conversation or to get dressed or to do this, but I'm really glad that we just get to be together in this day. And, I know a lot of that's easier said than done some days, but it's fun when you get those moments like that of finding a new show where tomorrow she can watch it again like it was her first time, seeing it all over again. And then it becomes comical for us, right? Where we're like,
Yes,
my
yes.
gosh, like when a loved one finds a belly laugh, I don't think there's nothing more enjoyable to get to experience that. So I'm glad that you got to have that moment. And hopefully, on the bad days, you just can hear that laugh in your own mind to bring you back to it too.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. It was definitely good.
I have an unusual, to me it's unusual, with my mom, just trying to understand what she's saying sometimes because she'll forget to put half the words in. So I have to ask simple questions over and over. But the one thing she can remember every single morning is the last dream she had. But she's using, it's like things from something from her past that she was connected to, but she considers them nightmares, and so I get confused. Should I try to say, well, what scared you? Try to get to understand what she's meaning, or soothe her that, oh, it's a good thing you woke up. I get confused as to just how far do you go when she can't remember, what she did 2 hours ago, but she can remember that dream, and she's using the words that, oh, it was wicked, it was horrible, and it was, which makes me wonder, well, how scary was it? Was it really scary, or is that just the way she's expressing it? But it happens frequently in the morning. So she said, oh, so I think I'm just going to get up early and wait till I'm tired and go back to sleep, and maybe it won't happen. She's just remembering those things vividly, but not realistically.
Is she on melatonin? I'm just curious.
No.
Okay.
But she's she's on so many medications. So I'm going to report that to her primary care doctor. But we even changed something she was taking to a morning time. So, but it hasn't made a difference. It's the words she's using to explain what she thinks she remembers. So, not knowing, is that a problem or is that just the wrong words?
Any thoughts
Do
from
the
you?
words seem to like match up with it? with what she's saying? Like, does it seem like what she's describing would be scary? Or does it seem
No,
like
not
maybe
at all. Like she was working and somebody asked her to move a dump truck and she didn't know how to do it. So it was so frightening that, it was a horrible, wicked nightmare, that kind of thing. That's like, oh dear, that would be hard. But, do you soothe? Is it just momentary? And then then she'll say, but I won't remember it in an hour. So I don't know why I'm saying that. It's like, after you just listen for 15 minutes.
That's very self-aware.
Yeah.
yes.
I always think of it as like what they're saying in that moment is their reality. And so sometimes the best thing to do is also lean into their reality. And I do enjoy and find humor in her own aspect of being like, listen, I'm not going to remember this anyways. And like, but I do think when she's coming to you in these moments of feelings and what and how she's feeling, I think a lot of it too is just like the validation of it and just getting her, once again, like the more she's speaking, the more her mind is moving and the more we just want her doing throughout the day too. I think, like you said, too, never is a bad thing to talk to our doctors about, like, here's what's going on. And is this something that has to do with medication or, UTIs? Is this a hallucination? Things like that. Always, when in doubt, talk it out with the providers as well. But I do think it's one, like, allowing them to just speak about it. So even just asking for details without it too. So like if it's a garbage truck, like what color was the garbage truck? Like, oh, interesting. A green garbage truck. When I was growing up, I had red garbage trucks. Did it have smoke coming out of it? And so just like kind of like, listen, if we can't laugh, we're going to cry. Right. So like, let's lean into it sometimes too, and just ask for like clarifying questions. And sometimes they'll get bored of us before we get bored of hearing what they're saying. And so allowing yourself to get them to speak about it a little bit more too, and maybe even subconsciously her mind's just wanting to replay it until it kind of like runs it all out, and then that moment will pass. But I think just allowing like validation, asking some more questions where like her mind then is seeing it, right? Like, and so asking what she's seeing, how it looks, and then just allowing her to kind of speak on it. And then, like you said, like she'll be done with it. And then you just kind of like carry on and move on to the next point. But I never think it's a bad thing of like the more that they're just moving their mind, the more things are kind of going throughout the day as well.
My mom does that. She has a lot of dreams, but of people who have passed. My father, my older sister, her mother. And she's always like, oh, I saw them last night. I'm like, well, what were they talking about? What were they saying? And she'll say stuff like, well, Yvonne wasn't saying anything. Sabine kept saying, well, when are you coming? I said, you should tell her, I don't have time for you right now. I'm busy. Her mother and her did not have a great relationship. So when her mother is just standing, she says she's just standing there looking at me. I said, well, you should ask her what's going on. I said, and be real specific. Ask her, where is she? Ask her, where is she? So that way, so the next time one of them says, when are you coming? We'll say, well, where the hell are you? How am I going to get there if I don't know where you are? And she just laughs. That makes her day, makes it like it was okay for her. So, but she only, her dreams are only of people who have passed already now. I don't know what that's about, but that's all she sees in her dreams now.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting too, like where do our minds go when we wander, right? To and just certain moments in time or memories or just people in general too. And I think what you're doing is fantastic too, of just like allowing her in those moments to be validated too, and then like find humor in those things. Cause I think too, like anytime we have dreams, especially when you're going through a cognitive change, right? I feel like for so many of our loved ones, they have to probably wake up and be like, was that a dream or was this some part of reality? I think a lot of their days, they question that so much too. So allowing them that comfort of this was a dream and this is what's going, because I can only imagine what it's like for a lot of them where they don't know truth versus false and trying to figure out a lot of that too, and finding comfort in just knowing that they can talk to you about what they're seeing, whether it is while they're awake or while they're sleeping too.
One thing
Yeah.
heard about dreams is that sometimes the specifics are not as important as the feeling. So if she's feeling really embarrassed, is there something she's feeling really embarrassed about, that it's not about the dump truck, but is it that she's not able to respond to people's requests for her or something? So you might ask about the feelings. I don't know where you would go with that, but that was yeah.
Oh yeah, I would ask. I mean, she doesn't seem bothered by them. Um, I think she's kind of entertained by them sometimes, because sometimes she'll just say, hey, I saw so and so last night, like it was a visit and they had conversation. I'm like, well, what were they talking about? And she'll say, well, nothing. They just wanted to know when I was coming. I was like, well, did you ask them where they are? We need to figure out where they are before you can come see them. Ask them where they are, because she swears her mother went to hell.
When you're saying that out loud, it's making me think, because my mom is nearly deaf, and I mean, she can see, but you can't remember. And maybe the fact that you're having a dream is more clear because you're sleeping, there's no distraction, it's happening inside of you, and that's it's just making you at least they're able to say that of what's happening. So maybe to look at it that way too, it's more real than being awake sometimes.
I think the feeling thing too is such an important part of communication too, right? Like as caregivers, a lot of times we're left with the understanding of the conversation and the feelings, where our loved ones a lot of times are just left with the feeling of the conversation because they're not remembering the conversation that we just had. And so while this is easier said than done, starting with that, like Kylee even put in her slides, like, taking the few seconds and pausing and just like being calm in your responses and kind of giving yourself that grace within it. Because while the moment's really frustrating for us, we can kind of pivot our own mind, right? We can keep going, doing what we're doing. We, though, are going to remember the conversation and why we were frustrated, what we were feeling in that moment, what even led us up to this, the milk spilled and we just got this milk, and, all of that goes into it. Our loved ones, though, are just going to be left with that feeling and not knowing why they're feeling that. And so a lot of times then too, that's going to lead to extra anxiousness or behavior changes or, just all of the emotions, because they're not sure why they're feeling what they're feeling. They're just feeling. And so also knowing that we as humans, like it's part of our nature that we take it out on our loved ones the most, which is not easy when you're the one that's being lashed out on, right? But that they're going to just take things out on you because they love you and you're the one that's there and you're there for them. But as they're just kind of processing all of those feelings as well, not remembering why they're also feeling that too. So on both sides as well, giving yourself a little bit of the grace of your own remembering of the conversation and what led to those emotions, knowing that they're not remembering what led there, but all of those feelings are still there at the same time.
I have a question that's sort of tangential to this, which is that my mother has seen there's definitely memories that are coming up where she thinks there's snakes in the room, and that is a memory from when she was 9. But there was one time she said, so she has Alzheimer's, I think, less than dementia from what you guys are all describing. Like she has a pretty good memory for people and places, can't speak very well. But a couple nights ago, she said that she saw a cat walking on the bed out of the side of her eye, and she's asking, do you see it? Is that like, do we know what that is? Like why that happens?
Hallucinations are pretty common, kind of dependent on the type of cognitive change. Sometimes they can be like related to true visual change, and other times it can just be that their brain is thinking about those things. If it's kind of, whether they're bothersome or not, the thing that works the best to get them to go away is the person themselves acknowledging it. So like you could say, oh yeah, like I'll tell the cat to go. But if you tell the cat to leave the room, it's probably not going to. But if you say, oh, okay, just tell the cat to jump off the bed, if she says it, it's going to be much more likely that it'll happen, because they have more control of those hallucinations. So we're like allowing them to acknowledge it, and to a certain extent kind of play along with it, because there's nothing inherently wrong, even if they're sometimes scary, saying, just saying, oh, if you tell it to go, just tell them to go away, and they'll leave the room, and kind of encouraging those types of things instead of, saying, I don't see it. 'Cause if you don't see it, then that can sometimes create more fear that it is something that doesn't exist, and then they don't understand why they see it and you don't.
Okay, what about, so one of the situations we're having is my mother, I think when she was 9, she was at a lake and there were snakes. I'm going to assume that this is legit, that there were snakes in the bedroom. And now we have a porta potty next to the bed and she'll be looking underneath. We call this a bad brain day because it doesn't always happen. But she's like, I'm looking for the snakes under the porta potty. They're wrapped around the toilet. And like, I would be worried about saying, because I keep saying to her, there have never been snakes in this house. That is a memory from the past, because I don't want her to actually think there are ones. So, like, should I say, oh, just tell it to go away? Or keep on going with, because it's not that she's necessarily seeing that the cat out of the eye. I think she legit thought that she was seeing a cat out of her eye. And it was like, it was dark in there too. So she couldn't have seen it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
There was no cat. But the snakes, I think, are a fear. And I can't tell if she thinks she's really seeing it or if she remembered seeing a snake around like wrapped around a toilet back at Lake George, but now she's looking for it because she doesn't want to get up and go to the bathroom because she's afraid it's there. So is it a bad idea to be like, oh, just tell it to go away? Because I don't want her to think that they're legit are, which is different from the spider on the bed, which was real and we all saw it, so, and now we've got we have these multiple issues where like some bugs are real and some things aren't. I don't even know where to go with that because it does create fear in the middle of the night because she's looking for these things before she gets up to go to the bathroom.
Are you having to get up to go to the bathroom with her regardless?
So we don't have, okay, when I'm in town, I kind of do night caregiving. When I'm not in town, there's nobody there. We just have the porta potty there to keep her from getting him. Well, my father's there, but he's not always waking up. So I'm there sometimes, so just to clarify that. But when I'm there, those are sometimes the things she says. Sometimes in the morning, she'll also talk about it when the caregiver comes at like 9:15. She will sometimes tell them that she's also looking for snakes around the potty. So that's a bad brain day in the morning. And at night, when they put her to bed, if she talks about snakes, because she doesn't always do it. Sometimes she never mentions it. And so sometimes at night, she just says, oh, there are snakes, have been, like kind of past tense. So it's happening at different times. It's very rare for it to happen in the middle of the day, ever.
My thought is you can allow her to look for them, right? And just acknowledge like, oh, we can check, and then reassure her like, oh, I don't see any, and she kind of gets that opportunity to just look and see for herself, hopefully, that there's nothing there. But kind of, again, being in whatever their present is, and just reassuring them like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll look, and then say, oh, I don't see any, do you? And then be able to kind of, go with that, at least if there is a caregiver or if your father is there with her. When she's alone, is it stopping her from getting up to go to the bathroom though?
She has a lot of trouble standing. And so in the middle of the night, she could spend 15 minutes with a flashlight. And so I finally gave her like a light next to the bed that she can press really easily. And so you can tell she's looking around. It's sort of stopping her. On the other hand, her fear of just standing up, I think, is also stopping her. It's more like, I think it disturbs the rest of us because we see it as that's a really bad, it's our problem. We see it as it's a bad brain day. It doesn't stop her from having her feet on the floor, interestingly. So I don't know. I think it does stop her from wanting to use the porta potty, to be honest, but even when she wants to, she takes like 15 minutes to try to stand up. So yeah.
It could also be a way of acknowledging that it's going to take her more time to get up, that's like a reason why it's taking longer. Like, oh, I'm looking for these, and that's why I'm still sitting here, instead of just like sitting at the edge of the bed and standing up. like having a reason for something to be taking longer, whether they realize that or not. It's kind of like to fill that void of, I know that if someone's here and they're trying to help me get to this porta potty, it's going to take me a while to get up. And whether I really can verbalize that is different, but knowing that it's taking longer. And so my excuse for it taking longer is that I'm going to sit at the edge of the bed and look around first before I try to get up.
That could be fair. Yeah. Oh, I wanted to mention also on the food thing. One thing we found for my mom is that she'll not swallow liquids. So we've been telling her to lean forward and then swallow. And that has been working out really well for us. I don't know whether that works for food, but if anyone's just sort of like not swallowing, it may be a fear that it's going to go down the air pipe. So when they lean forward, it's less likely to go down there. That's been working for us really, really well.
Yeah, certainly a strategy that can be helpful. Another thing too is changing, like having them take the sip, and then if they're not swallowing, can they kind of put their hand on their neck? It doesn't actually do anything, but it gives them some type of stimulation that kind of reminds them like, oh yeah, I've got to do this. I've still got liquid in my mouth. Touching your lips, putting the straw back to their mouth, putting the cup back to their mouth. Those types of tactile sensations tend to help that swallow initiation too.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining. If you haven't already, please make sure to put your loved one's name in the chat so I can just make sure that your care navigators are aware that you guys were here today and just like the topic of everything today. Thank you, Kylee, for joining us and being a part of just like the conversation today. I think that this was really helpful just to have a good conversation about communicating and just different tips, tools, and just different support as well too. It's always, I think, nice to know and to feel not alone in some of the struggles as well too. So I hope that you guys have a really great rest of your week. And if you're needing anything, please feel free to reach out to your care navigator, or you can reach out to me directly, Sabrina@synapticure.com, and have a good rest of your day.